Hi guys, I'm Phantom GG, and we're going to be reviewing patch 10.1, and we're going to be using PC Games as our source. It's a pretty reliable source. Most of the time they have some good info out. I'll be leaving the link in the description if you guys want to use this website for yourselves. I'm doing this patch rundown pretty early because I'm going to be going out on Christmas vacation and won't be able to do any recording back then because I'll be with my family, no access to computer. So I'm just making this now, and you can take this with a grain of salt because some things may or may not change by then. But normally, by the habits that Riot's been having at this point of how close to patches, they tend to just kind of not do much after. So, Set overall, I'm not gonna go too much in detail. I think his stats are fine. I think he has some really strong abilities. Where I really have concerns about this champion is he doesn't have the greatest of gap closers. He just kind of has to walk at his opponents and hope that walking at them is good enough. He gets a little bit of movement speed with his Q, but that's only for 1.5 seconds. I almost wish that this could be last for like a 2 whole seconds. I feel like he's almost had to go like a really gimmicky route that most Darius and Tryndamere players do, where they go Ghost so he can actually just speed up for kills. I think he'll be like a really good solid solo queue champion, but I do not believe he will be the greatest of team play champions purely because he will be so easy to kite out, and the only way he is going to be viable for competitive if his numbers are so overtuned that despite how easy he is to kite, he will have a very easy time killing you. Because the other type champions like this are any good is they need guarantee reward when they're on top of you. Like basically when Darius is on top of you, you're kind of set in stone to die if he has decent amount of items. And Set kind of needs to be the same way to be relevant. I'm really disappointed that they made another Juggernaut champion while knowing how impossible these champions are to keep balanced. So I do not have the highest opinions on Set. I think he's an interesting champion. He's a cool champion. Lore-wise, I really like him. But when it comes to the champion himself, he's going to be very hard to balance. I think he's going to be a solo queue only champion for the most part, unless his numbers are just sincerely overtuned. I think on release, he'll be competitively viable from good numbers. But once he gets nerfed, I don't see him ever coming into pro play fight. Sorry, I got the hiccups. Pro play viability. Aphelios, they're going to be nerfing the mark damage on his sniper rifle, and they're going to be by a little bit, by 10%. And it's not going to be the greatest of nerfs, so it's still going to be a decent ability. This is very negligible. On his Inferno gun, the flamethrower, they're nerfing the damage from 40 to, 0.4 to 0.25. And overall, this basically stops it from one-shotting you, and I say this ability is better off being used as an execute than it is being used as an initiator. I still think it's going to be a very good go-to ability, but it's less suppressive than what it is on the current patch. I still think Aphelios is going to be one of the better ADCs on the patch, and that these nerfs will be not to notice outside of R no longer one-shotting you with Fire Gun. Alistair, base HP increased to 575 from 573 base damage increase, so he gets 1 HP and 180. Someone was paid to do these buffs. With very minor healing increase. Okay. Azir, wall duration to 5 from free, damage increase to 175 from 150, free to, ooh, so 250 to free 25 at rank 11, so rank 11 is going to be a very big power spike for Azir to just start doing things and make big impact of his ultimate. This is actually quite a big increase for Azir because, like, Orianna, this ultimate's going to be hitting multiple people, so let's say this hits free people with free 25, multiply that by free, that's over 900 damage right out the bat. So that's nice. Not gonna lie, that's a pretty nice buff. Competitive, this definitely makes this year a bit more of appealing an option with the burst and control he can create. Do I think this is going to make people spam Azir? I don't think it will, but I do think that people who are good at Azir should actually consider picking him up again when it comes to competitive. Solo queue, this is also nice as well. I think Azir is perfectly fine for solo queue. I think the main problem is Azir in solo queue. He's a pretty hard champion to play, and not many people can do it. Corki, damage increased to 9, so rank 1 doesn't matter, rank 2 doesn't matter, and you don't really notice anything until rank 3 where it's only 20. These are unimportant buffs. What's hurting Corki right now is just he's a champion that has low impact, doesn't do much, and there's champions who do exactly what he does while offering you more. Examples would be like just about any mage period. Literally any mage period. Where Corki is most appealing is he has a bit more kiting and defensive power than compared to other mid laners, but when his damage and CC is so much lesser, you don't really care about the defense. You rather just have the extra damage and CC. Ezreal is getting 120 from 110 in his Q80 ratios. This is a nice late game buff, but the big problem that Ezreal is having is that he has no keystone that he can work with in the early game. Lane phase, he kind of feels exactly the same, but the issue he's having is the less gold he's generating off the loss of having Cryptomancy. And this really goes into why I really don't like keystones in general existing in the game, because you get this unfair disadvantage with champions like Ezreal or Aurelion Sol who have no true keystone, while other champions like Saya, Garen, Maokai, Graves have keystones that they like quite a lot, and then champions like Ezreal are just flat out missing out. And it just feels unfair when some champions have keystones and other champions don't. So moving on from that subject, I think this is definitely moving Ezreal into a more late game type of identity, where you have a bit of this late game single target type champion who can just poke people out. And I believe that has its time and its place, but in a solo queue environment, that's a pretty big feels bad, because you're this level 6 Ezreal with a feeding mid laner and top laner, and you don't really have many comeback mechanics to force your team back into a game. For example, Asaya, when she starts scaling, can actually make things happen by going RE into team fights and stunning people up, and just she can be a more independent character, while the Ezreal is more dependent on his team to do things for him. Competitive, I think he's still an okay go-to pick, but when it comes to a solo queue environment, I don't think he is a very friendly pick at all. Garen, so Garen's been nerfed over and over and over again. And so just going through to 8.2 to 0 to 0.6.6 is, I don't think this is going to be nearly enough what Garen players need on a solo queue environment. I think the rework was a mess. I don't understand why they did it the way they did it. Garen definitely needs more. He needs many different things. The strategy that he was good at doing got heavily nerfed, which was the Relic Shield Yuumi. I guess you don't really need to do the Relic Shield anymore. I guess it can still kind of work in the bot lane if you're willing to commit to it, but even then, it's just like, why would you? I would say I'm not a big fan of Garen right now. There's just better go-to strategies. Gnar, so it looks like what they're doing with Gnar is that they're only buffing Mega Gnar and never really touching Mini Gnar. But I'd say the biggest problem that Gnar has with anything is that his passive, his meter, whatever you want to call it, it feels a little bit luck-based of having your Fury when you need it, where people can go, oh, just charge it off minions or just preserve your Fury, but you don't really ever get to do that in a solo queue environment because a solo queue environment is so random. So it's hard to be the independent player as Gnar when you don't even have full control over your passive, or when your team does things so you can work with them to get those stream 5-man Gnar ultimates. This definitely does help him out when he does transform for a split pushing type perspective, so he definitely is a bit of a stronger split pusher. He has a bit more dueling with this, because 120 to 140 in a Q80 ratio is quite a punch. But even that, you're not really going to notice that too much, because Gnar tends to go into tanky items anyways, so he doesn't really get to abuse this as much as other champions would. Unless I'm misreading this correctly. But I think I'm reading it correctly. Wall up damage increase on W 20 to 25, 105 to 145. I don't think this is going to be enough to make Gnar viable. I think Gnar is kind of stuck permanently in this very mediocre spot just because of how unreliable he is as a champion. When you have champions that do what he does in a far more reliable manner, see Qiyana. Graves. So this is actually a really nice buff. So 18 to 16, 16 to 14, 14 to 12. So every point is going to get 2 less seconds on it, and that's actually something you will notice by quite a lot. Because the end result is it will go from 14 to 12, and this basically allows him to get 1 extra E per team fight, because the way his passive works is every auto lowers the cooldown by basically a whole second, so this increases the times he gets to use E by quite a lot, and this is good for farming, this is good for dueling, this is good for team fights, this is overall a nice strong buff. I do think he could use one more buff before he goes back to full competitive viability, like maybe a buff on his Q damage, but I definitely think this is a nice strong buff that Graves mains will appreciate and will increase his win rate by quite a bit. I would say he's definitely an above average champion now with these buffs. Do I think he's great and oppressive? No. Heinerdinger, so 10 less damage per rocket at all levels, and this won't matter too much. It's still going to do quite a bit of damage, especially in how it scales into ratios. Still going to be a really good bot laner, decent mid laner, okay top laner. For his E, they're nerfing the damage on E upgrade, and this is very weird because most of the time you can ask any Heimerdinger one trick in high elo from Masters to Challenger. Most of the time they're going into Q or W anyways. So E is basically only used for chasing in the first place. So it's weird that they're nerfing the damage on it. Jace. So Jace is a bit of a complicated subject because when it comes to Jace, he's a champion that's not so good in low elo because he doesn't really do the things you want a champion to do in low elo. But he's really, really good in high elo because you have more organized teammates that let Jace do the things he wants to do, like group up in siege, oppress onto the enemy laner, and then you just have better Jace players in general. They're bringing the Q damage from 55 to 55, so early game you get nothing, but late game you get 25 extra damage. I think that is decent buff. It's very small, very tiny, but it's not the worst buff. Do I think this makes him disgustingly oppressive in top lane now? No, I don't think it does, especially when you consider how many points he needs to actually make this effective. So, it's an okay buff. It's not like, oh my god, thank you, Riot, but it's something, kind of. I guess they're just trying to help out his very subpar win rate in low elo, but at the same time, if you're just talking about low elo, is 5 damage at rank 2 going to be all the difference? 10 damage at rank 3, is that going to be all the difference? Like, no. So he's still going to be good in high elo, but still really crud in low elo. And at the same time, these aren't buffs that are going to make him become the most disgusting creature in the world in high elo. So these buffs do almost no changes for both low and high elo. Callista, so their HP per level increased to 100 from 89, armor per level to 4 from 3.5. They're trying to make her a little bit tankier because she's so easy to abuse during lane phase, but at the same time, this doesn't really address the problem where what's making her bad in bot lane is the fact that there is so many lane bullies from both the support role and the ADC role that just have better itemization than her, better range than her, and better damage than her where Caitlyn can go Storm Razor or just outrange her with autos. You have Brand or Syra who can just harass her from afar and make sure she can't safe farm. You have Blitzcrank where the moment she missteps, she's just going to get hooked and die to the enemy ADC. Kalista is struggling right now because of how easy she is to bully. Kassadin, so they're not revealing nerfs on this. Not only they're reworking E to have a new ability where instead of just working with autos with the E, it now also works with spells, which makes her more synergized with multiple characters now. I almost wonder if we're going to see some interesting combinations like Swain Yumi or other mages plus, other mages plus Nami. Nami, Yumi, it's sorry, it rhymes. Do I think this is a buff that's going to break her? No, but I do think this is a nice little addition to her toolkit. It's almost like a type of buff that makes you go, why didn't it always work like this? I don't think this is going to break her. Maybe she sees a 1%, 2% win rate increase because of this, but I don't think it's going to explode her. Sejuani HP per level increased to 100 from 95. And then damage increase 240 to 40, 200 to 240. This isn't even the first ability that Sejuani maxes. So I think this is going to be a very unnoticed buff that doesn't really accomplish much of anything. In most cases, when it comes to ability buffs, you want it to kind of be the ability you buff first. So like let's say, for example, Jace buffs his Q first. You would want most of his buffs to be on his Q because that's the level the ability he's maxing first, so it's going to have the most impact if it gets buffed. I'm not saying that you should only buff the abilities that you max first, but most of the time those are the most useful. And if you're not buffing those abilities first, then the abilities that you buff better be getting like a pretty big oomph to it. And this is not a big enough oomph for it to really matter, especially since it's a single target ability. Like Azir is different with him getting 40 damage because, for example, Azir most of the time is going to be hitting free to 2 people with his ultimate. So let's say you give his ultimate 100 extra damage, you're actually giving it 300 extra damage because most of the time it's going to be hitting free people anyways. But with Sejuani, it's only going to be hitting one person at all times, so it's not getting that much value when it's buffed, since it's both single target and nerfed last. So for this ability to really matter, it needs to be getting quite a big buff, which it is not. Set shield duration decreased to 3 seconds from 2 seconds. That's actually quite a long time to have a shield. Damage increased to 90 from. Okay, this is actually a pretty big. So being hit by Haymaker is actually going to hurt a lot, but he still has the issue where he's so easy to just walk away from. Shaco. So like how I said with Jace, Shaco has the opposite problem where he's really good in lower elos, but really bad in the highest form of play. Where in a solo queue environment, he feels really good, but in a competitive environment where you're facing competent players, he feels really bad because they know how to avoid what he does. At the same time, it really feels like Riot doesn't even understand what's making Shaco a good champion in solo queue or bad in competitive, because if they were paying attention, they would notice that half the Shaco players are going to AP build now for both support and jungle. And when he's going AD, most of the time he's killing you off of the Q plus passive into the backstab. So having E nerfed, like, it just feels so random because he's not even farming with this ability. If anything, it feels like they're kind of trying to attack support Shaco because support Shaco is kind of using this ability to harass people. But even then, it's so random and weird. Next up, we have Shyvana. They say this is a change, but this is just overall a buff. They're making her able to get more stacks by giving her the Elder Dragon. Cloud Dragon now actually helps out her ultimate. Flame Breath is being buffed a little bit, so this is just overall a buff, but the buffs are so small that they don't really do much of anything. So I was going to explain last, since this is so huge. I should just explain it now. So, base HP decreased. That's a lot. Base armor decreased 27 from 30. That's kind of a lot. MR decreased to 32 from 39. That's kind of a lot. Is he getting anything? This game buffed this patch, right? Because so far I only see nerfs. Max charges from 3 to 2. What? This does nothing! Most of the time, Silas only needs 2 charges in the first place because he's just gonna. Because you're gonna be like doing E auto, then E again, auto, Q, auto. Like, dude, does Riot even watch how Silas players play? And they're decreasing the range? Like, this accomplishes nothing. Primary target damage AP increased to 25 from 20. Okay, so he has a little bit extra damage with passive. Okay. And I guess this kind of helps him activate it more smoother, even though he's using it instantly. Okay. I guess this is kind of a buff. Kinda. Yeah, it's a little bit of a buff. Base damage changed to 40 to from 45. So the first Q is being nerfed, and the second Q is being buffed. So basically, this kind of makes it that you don't really want to use this if you aren't in like point blank range and CCing the enemy. Let's actually do a bit of math now. So if the first Q is losing 45 at max range, and then this is being wait, this is actually a big buff if you get to hit the first Q. I mean the second Q. A lot of damage is being put into this. Slow duration decreased to 1.5 seconds. Well, it's gonna be a pain in the butt to hit. Cooldown increase. It's not the worst cooldown nerf. 1 second isn't the end of the world. And then you're nerfing the minion damage. W, cooldown changed to 14, 12, 5, 8. So cooldown is actually being a bit nicer. Mana increase. Ooh, that's good. That stings. That really stings. So basically, you are only using this when on you are not allowed to use this to help yourself farm anymore. That is such a waste of mana. Damage. Are they both does mana, right? No. Damage increased. Oh, that's actually a big buff. That actually helped us scaling by quite a bit. Base healing changed to 30 from 70, 60 to 90, but it scales more with AP. Healing amp 40% lowered to 50 from 75%. Health AP ratio decreased to 50 from 60. Remove damage amp when enemies below 40. So he does less damage. This doesn't execute anymore. That's actually a lot of damage being removed. So basically the damage is more consistent. How much bonus damage does he get on the execute? I guess you kind of get it back from this. But at the same time, I would say overall this ability is kind of nerfed and kind of being reserved as a burst ability onto the enemy. And then E cooldown changed to 14 to 13 to 10 at all ranks to 14 at all ranks. Damage increased to 80 to 100 per. Whoa. That's a lot of damage. So damage buff, damage buff, damage. So basically they want Sylas to be a glass cannon in the mid lane. This could potentially work, but my only concern is with the lack of MR he has now, does champions like Syndra just walk all over him? And he's also losing more health, so this guy is actually really easy to harass now. It's really hard for me to have a firm opinion on these changes, because most of the pro players are saying he's nerfed. But when you look at how much damage he's actually getting, it's quite a bit. Like, this is a champion where if he gets to do a full combo on you, he basically one-shots you. But the problem is that his full combo is so unreliable because it requires his E to land. So basically, if his E doesn't land and the Q doesn't land, I would say these are overall nerfs. I would say these are nerfs that could easily become buffs, where basically what would happen is that he gets released, and then he's just so easy to abuse during lane phase that he feels like a bad champion. But then what happens is, right, we'll like give him some armor and magic resist back, and maybe a bit of health back, and then he gets all these buffs still, and he becomes like a good champion. But then I'm wondering, what if you're facing a Sylas player who can just reliably land E over and over again? It's interesting. This is actually interesting. Because what he lost in tankiness, he got back in damage. Do the cons outweigh the pros here? This is 50-50. I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that these buffs could potentially be very, very good. Because I don't know about you, but 20% AP to 100% AP, that's a lot. That's not something you can ignore. But my worry is that this is just way too easy to dodge. This is a champion I'm gonna have to watch closely when it comes to the stats. Varus cooldown ink decreased to 18 from 20 to 10 from 12, so this is nice for his lane phase. Allows him to pack out a bit of extra arrows. But this isn't going to bring him back into the meta. What's really hurting Varus is the fact his itemization and his attack speed build was nerfed such a long time ago. So the only time you really play Varus is when you want to go Lethality Varus. And Lethality Varus just simply isn't always the go-to. Next up we have Vi. They have a picture of Jinx, so just ignore that. Vi is going to have a true unstoppable now. You can't really stop it at all anymore unless you have Zhonya's. You can't displace her during her uppercut animation, so that's a nice QL. It's not going to be the greatest buff though. And in Zyra, when you read this, she just has basically a bit more slow now. Edge of Night, 55 to 50. This is going to make Assassins a little bit happier. Serrated Dirk buff from 30 to 25. That's actually really good. Spell Thieves. So they're giving you your mana regen back, but they're taking away 25 AP. So this is actually a pretty big nerf to mage supports. Do I think it's going to remove mage supports from the game? I don't think so, because the numbers that most mages themselves have are actually pretty good. So if you fuse these nerfs, so let's say you nerf Spell Thieves, and then later on you nerf like Zyra's damage, then that's when this nerf becomes pretty painful. Steel Shield Guards. So you get more base health regen, and nothing about its gainer. So this is going to be really good for tank supports. Relic Shield, they're nerfing the AP you get. And the reason why they're doing this is because a lot of mage supports were going Relic Shield because the mana and the AP you're losing wasn't the worst, and the tankiness you got out of this was actually kind of nice. So this is actually going to be less used now. Spectral Sickle, you're going to be losing 10 AD, but overall, I think this is going to be worth it because you're getting a lot of mana regen back. So I think that's going to actually be a worthwhile trade-off. Eyeball Collection, this is... Somebody was paid to make this change. So somebody was paid. I'm not even going to talk about this. Skins, the mechas look kind of cool. Dragon Slayer is actually kind of cool. Dragon Slayer Trundle is really cool. They're giving a new Sylas skin. I don't know. This kind of is making me think about the Sylas changes. It's really hard to predict where it's going to go because they did a huge trade from taking this for damage. I think he's actually going to have a good win rate. I think this is actually going to help out mid lane quite a lot. I do think this ultimately destroys jungle Sylas though, to no return. Or maybe it helps because it's second Q. I do think this could potentially be very, very good for Sylas. And if I'm wrong on that, so be it. Janna, cool. Rengar, cool. All in all, I'm Phantom GG, and this is my rundown on the newest patch. For TLDR, Set, he'll be okay in solo queue. Maybe even good. Not so good in team play. Aphelios, still going to be one of the better ADCs. Alistar doesn't matter. Azir, get nice buffs. Corki doesn't matter. Ezreal doesn't matter. Garen doesn't matter. Nara doesn't matter. Graves kinda matters. Heimerdinger doesn't matter. Jace doesn't matter. Kalista doesn't matter. Kasten don't know yet. Nami's cool, but doesn't really matter too much. Sejuani doesn't matter. Deshego doesn't matter. Shyvana doesn't matter. Sylas could be huge. This could actually be the biggest. This is 100% the biggest change on the patch. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter. So while they're changing a lot this patch, nothing here really upsets the meta. I'll say the biggest game changers would be what they did to Graves, Azir, and Sylas. I'm Phantom GG. You have a good day. Peace.